How have you been?
Uh, I don't know. Am I confused? Like, I didn't expect us to be back here. There's so many other interesting topics to talk about, yet this continues to
Title of this video, Wall Street Journal, Trump leaning to sending troops into Iran. Yeah, we'd heard about that.
escalate. Wall Street Journal putting out a report that Trump is considering ground troops. I know we've seen those reports before, but now Trump talking about it, reports coming out, strikes continuing in the southern region. So I'm starting to worry that logic will not prevail and this could get into a longer war.
Logic would dictate that
No, shortage in the oil market will bring it to an end.
about a month or two ago, we would have found a way to gracefully or ungracefully exit and back off.
Yeah. Yeah. If you did you I don't know, did you start your channel? I don't know, when did you start covering geopolitical matters and global economic matters? Were you covering much during the Ukraine war or many years ago during other wars?
Yep. I think I had to search my history. I think the first time I wrote about the possibility of an Iran war was when George Bush was still president.
Oh wow, okay. Okay,
So I've watched various presidents try and get strong armed into it. Obama almost got into it. Biden. I kept watching this, and of course I care from an energy standpoint. So like, oh gosh, if the Strait of Hormuz gets closed, like that was sort of my thesis from the beginning, as it would be for everybody. But I never thought we would actually do it. So I've been tracking it for a long time. I'm a little astonished that we're doing it though.
Yeah. And the reason I asked you as well is something I've been doing a lot is trying to compare what we're seeing right now to what we saw in the Russia-Ukraine war and all the way back to Afghanistan.
I'm not surprised we went after Iran. What I am surprised is that Trump went along with it, that Trump allowed himself to be tricked into this war. It's a presidency-ending mistake to have bombed the supreme leader. It's going to hurt Republicans in the midterms, give the midterms to Democrats, and lead to Trump's impeachment. So it's literally politically suicidal to do what Trump did.
In Iraq is like the process of accidentally getting into a forever war or the escalation trap playing out. I've used the Ukraine war many times. I would never expected it to last multiple years with hundreds of thousands of dead, meaning millions of family members impacted, because each person that dies has family members, kids, parents.
Yeah.
So that's the worry that I have, is that logic dictates that we should be out of this. But if we're still in it, then how do we know that mistakes won't continue and things get really bad? Trita Parsi told me earlier today, he thinks it's more likely, and he's usually always level-headed, and he's really good at getting things right. And he told me he's more worried that by the end of this year, we're more likely to see escalation, which includes strikes on energy infrastructure, that being more likely than an end to the war and peace.
I would agree. It seems more likely than not. I think Iran is still being what I would consider to be restrained at this point. Putin's being extraordinarily restrained. I don't know what's holding him.
I would be restrained if I was Iran too, because if I was Iran, I know that I am winning. This is traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. This is the amount of missing oil. It's huge, and now it's gone back down to basically zero. This continues, Iran wins. Another month and a half, and the world runs out of oil. And all the leverage is in Iran's hands.
Him back at this point, because just today we found out that the last major refinery in Russia that had not yet been targeted got hit. So that's, if that was happening in the United States or in any other country, it would be obviously like just a gigantic.
Just to push back on here, there are two schools of thoughts on what's going on with refineries in Russia. One is the West, which is, like he's going to mention it, like 50% of Russians' refinery capacity is offline. Then you have Alexis Mercouris, who is an expert on Russia, poo-pooing it, saying it's repaired in days, maybe a week. I think the truth is somewhere between that. Maybe 10 to 15% of Russia's oil refining is offline. It's being repaired, but every time one place gets repaired, another one gets hit. And so that means that you practically have 10 to 15% of Russia's oil refining that's constantly offline. And that's a big deal.
Emergency, because your fuel is your economy. And to target that is one of the most existential sort of economic attacks you could make on a country. And it extends into everything, not just the money system, but the food systems. And it's existential, right? Because, I can't figure out why Russia hasn't taken more of those Oreshnik missiles and dialed them into the Ukrainian parliament, or
To some extent, I agree. But the realization I've come to is that Alexei Mercouris is probably right to an extent in that the damage isn't as extreme as being portrayed by the West. So that's why Russia still feels it can be somewhat restrained. Though I don't know how long that will last. There's a lot of pressure for Russia to just strike the places the drones are coming from, the factories, even if they're in Europe.
Or gone further. But I get the sense, and see, what do you think? Because you talk to more people than I do about this, that it feels like we're just poking, because Trump just came out and said he's okay with, Russia being struck if that brings an end to the war quicker, but we're supplying.
Yeah, so that's an example of why I think Trump is a disaster internationally. The second term is he's been just going along with all the nonsense being done against Russia, these long-range strikes into Russia that risk nuclear escalation. Like Russia strikes back into Europe, then Article 5, a war between Europe and Russia, and if Europe is stupid enough to strike back, then Russia might use a nuke, and then we nuclear war. It's very dangerous.
The armaments and the targeting for that, right? So it's hop, skip, and a jump. It's kind of us, the United States and NATO attacking Russia directly, and Russia said don't do.
Ukraine is just a launching platform. These are European drones fired with U.S. intelligence, U.S. targets. Ukraine's only role is a launching platform.
Do that, don't red line. And then you had Lavrov come out and say, we've made a change to our nuclear stance so that if we feel we're under existential threat, that applies. And it used to just be as a response to a first strike. That was their stance. So they widened it a little bit or modified it. So I look at all that and I'm just like, obviously somebody's poking at Russia saying, come on, do something, And I think the same thing's happening with Iran, right? Just kind of poking, right? Do something. And I think, as best I can tell, then that gives you your casus belli. Oh my gosh, look at this horrible, unexpected, totally unprovoked thing that Russia or Iran did, and we're going to have to respond forcefully. Here's why. It kind of feels like that's where we're headed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it feels like a bet.
There's one bit of good news on that front with regard to escalation in Ukraine war is that Ukrainian drones haven't been that effective in the last 3 weeks. Partly it's because I think of all the multiple different steps Russia's taken to counter them. One is bombing gas stations across Ukraine and bombing trucks across Ukraine because these drones were being launched from trucks. And to move them, you need gas and you need the trucks. And so that's one area. Then I think Russia's air defense has just been strengthened again. Apparently, to detect the drones earlier, they're now flying the Russian equivalent of AWACS planes. The planes with the radars that can see very far to detect the drones as they're coming up like valleys or dead zones in Russian radars. So they can detect them earlier and deal with them and shoot them down. So Ukraine hasn't had any big drone success in the last 3 weeks, which is very positive. If Russia feels it can manage the current level of drones, it might not strike Europe. But my fear is that Europe is still all out geared towards drones. And a number of drones might increase again. The U.S. might figure out some counter, because it's U.S., not Ukraine, of course, to what Russia is doing, and there'll be more strikes. The Europe and the United States' desire to provoke Russia seems to have no bounds, so they're bound to do something more at some point.
So it feels like the Ukrainians, the Americans, Europe, they're all betting that striking the energy infrastructure would force Putin to concede on some points to get a deal. And then
I think there's some deluded people that believe that, but I think others, it's just about weakening Russia. That they know Russia is never going to just it's not going to change its position on the negotiating table. It's not going to surrender. But they're using the same strategy they used against Syria, the Assad regime. They funded the insurgents, and they just put pressure on Syria until it collapsed. That's what's going on with Iran and Russia right now. They are the targets. Pressure, they want, doesn't matter if it's successful, just apply more and more pressure. That's why there's been 23 rounds of sanctions by the EU against Russia. If one round of sanction doesn't work, another round of sanctions. If drones on the front lines isn't enough to turn the tide in Ukraine, then let's go long-range drones. Let's use NATO airspace to attack Russia. Just more and more and more. Anything to weaken Russia. And eventually, you apply enough pressure, Russia will collapse like Syria, is the thinking, is the goal. Even if it's not anytime soon. Of course, I think the West will collapse before Russia, because it's getting to that point.
The counter to that, the risk they're taking is that Putin escalates. And, you know, you've just poked the bear far enough that they use Oreshniks at the parliament. Or, I know that's more symbolic to escalating the strikes. Some are talking, they've been talking for months about striking NATO territory, you know, the drone warehouses and the manufacturing, the manufacturers for drones and military equipment.
By the way, the renewal of war in Iran makes it more likely that Putin does strike back against drone factories in Europe, because every precision ammunition we use against Ukraine is one less missile that's available to use against Russia in case of Article 5. Our deterrence in terms of Europe is just going down and down. Same with Taiwan. China must be looking at the island nation and be salivating right now.
In Europe, be struck by Russia. And the same thing I feel is happening in Iran. It's like Trump is betting, I could be wrong, by the way, on the Iran especially. I could be wrong that Trump maybe is planning for a ground operation like he's saying, which has got to take him by his word. But the way I see it is Trump.
Judging by the locations of the strikes in Iran and the rhetoric out of Washington and the fact that it's reaching the end of the line. If Trump's going to try something on the ground, it has to be next week. The window is closing. Afterwards, the amount of our stockpile of precision ammunition is maybe 2 more weeks. Time before oil shock happens is maybe 2 more weeks. So if you're going to try something, you have to try it while you still have the assets in place to maybe make something work.
Trump is betting that continuing the strikes on Iran may get them to concede on charging a toll of the Strait of Hormuz. But what's bizarre for me is that we bombed the hell out of them during the war. 10 times more than what we're bombing them in the last couple of weeks. 10 times more. We're bombing them right now 90% less than we did during the war, the peak of the war. At the peak of the war, it did not work for them to concede on any point. And the MOU ended up being a surrender document. So if they didn't concede back then, how do we know that they're gonna concede now? So that's why like that point doesn't make sense. It's like you bomb them to that level and they don't concede, so you bomb them again, but at this level they're going to concede. It's like the opposite of the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are trying to escalate to get Trump to concede. The Americans are like de-escalating for Iran to concede. That's just the bizarre part of it, unless I'm missing something. Or maybe,
well, compared to the ceasefire, it is an escalation.
Maybe I'm just wrong and stupid and naive, and this is Trump literally conducting a shaping operation to degrade their capabilities so he could conduct some sort of raid or ground operation on the islands, which sounds insane to me.
It would probably be the highest loss of U.S. servicemen and women's lives since probably any of the conflicts we've been in. Iran clearly has
had probably the most in the shortest period of time, because they're going to get wiped out real fast. This is the era of FPV drones, and Iran is the mountains country that's just mountains. So it's a fortress of a country. You don't want to go in against a place like this. All these mountains riddles with military facilities, all of them filled with different instruments of death.
Capabilities that are pretty sharp with their missiles. They actually haven't really broken out some of the good stuff still yet. Actually, in the last few ship strikes, a couple of them had signatures. I'm not positive, but it looked like they finally broke out what we would call anti-ship missiles. This is not the drones, not the slow-moving things. They did a couple of those, but there were a couple of strikes there which looked like, okay, one of the ship captains said we were hit with a cruise missile. I don't think he really used cruise missiles for this. They have these, the CM-302s from China. These are supersonic, wave-skimming anti-ship missiles. And I don't know if they used one of those, but they still clearly have a lot of options on the table. So to get to an island to even begin to inhabit it and take it over, you got to get there first. And I don't know how you really get there except by boat at this stage.
I grew up in Switzerland, and I can tell you the Swiss Alps are riddled with military facilities. It makes sense to you. You put your hospital underneath a mountain, the safest place in the world. You always hear stories of hospitals being bombed in Gaza, Lebanon, etc. Well, Switzerland, the hospital is underneath a mountain, somewhere that could survive a nuke. It's the best place for a hospital. And yeah, you drive up those Swiss mountain roads, and if you look at the cliff at the right place, you can see the vague outline of a door in the rock face. And I'm sure that Iran is the same thing, that it's just really easy. You just bore a hole into the granite and you make your own caves, and It's one of the most safe bunkers you could possibly have. Granite is hard.
You're not going to fly in enough people with helicopters to do anything other than, grab a little piece of territory temporarily at this stage. So I don't know, but the United States has been sort of bombing those coastal areas, which could be softening it up for, make it a little easier, I guess, but I think it would be insane too.
Well, there you go. Press Secretary Levitt just said the Strait of Hormuz is open for ships not going to and from Iranian ports. Funny enough, also today, the Reuters reported that, let me find the exact report. They reported that
it's so insane that the United States is just openly lying like this.
Ships, there we go. Some ships refuse.
Oh, another reason for that is to keep oil prices down. And if you're in the oil market and the straits are open, okay, nothing to worry about. Except the reality is this. No ships getting through. Or less than a dozen a day.
Using U.S. military-guided Hormuz transits after attacks, according to sources. Commercial shipping companies are increasingly steering clear of the U.S. Navy's recommended transit corridor, the southern one, the Omani one, through the Strait of Hormuz after a series of Iranian attacks. And you're right, the Iranians have attacked many ships with missiles. One of them sunk, a Turkish one. I don't know if you saw the videos the last couple of days. Literally sunk. It's not an oil tanker. It's a commercial ship that was sinking. And many other ships got struck. One person died on one Emirati ship. So this is very different to the attacks we saw earlier in the early days of the war, which was mainly through drones and loitering munitions. Now it is cruise missiles and anti-ship missiles targeting those vessels that are going through the Omani side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as well, just to put it in there, we mentioned the Russian refineries, but also in the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea, according to the Ukrainians, but they've released a lot of video that looks legit to me. They claim to have struck and disabled or even sunk up to 120 Russian ships, which include cargo carriers, bulk carriers, tankers.
I don't think it was. That's the Ukrainian exaggeration, but it was a lot of ships. But this was more an issue for grains. Grain was being transferred through that sea. This is the small sea that's within the small sea, just north of the Black Sea. Let me show you. Here. North of the Black Sea, this little body of water. This is where Ukraine hit and destroyed a lot of ships. And in response to that, Odessa was hit ultra hard. The hardest it's been hit in the war so far. And the port has been completely leveled. There won't be any ships going in and out of Odessa for the rest of this war.
I mean, this is, I think, this is probably the largest single 1 month loss of commercial ships since World War II. I mean, it's very significant.
Yeah, I've seen it. We're not.
Yeah, Chris Martinson, he's good, but he is a little bit too much on believing that 50% of Russia's refinery capacity had been wiped out. He said that, or he's going to say that, and that claim is just bogus, because if it'd gone to that point, there'd already be war with Europe. Russia would be at war. It wouldn't have let things get to that point without retaliating, going after drone factories in Europe. So my guess is 10 to 15% of refining capacity is offline temporarily, and it's going to be restored as long as Russia somehow prevents new drone strikes.
They're not making the headlines.
Also, the ships that were struck in this sea here, in any case, they weren't sunk. You just see them, they might not be immobile, then you'd repair. I didn't see any of them that were sunk. They were just hit, disabled.
Because everyone's distracted with Iran. And even Iran is slowly making less and less headlines. And that's something else one of my guests mentioned, which is concerning, is that people can't remember who mentioned it to me today, but they were saying that people are just moving on. They've accepted it as reality. I think Shrita Parsi again today, he was mentioning some polls where the average American has accepted that the Iran war will going to last. I saw that poll. 60-70% of Americans expect the Iran war to last a prolonged period of time. But also it's moving on with the news cycle. It's kind of moving on from Iran. And that level of complacency, they're getting used to it, is the concerning part, because that's what led to Ukraine from it's going to lead to a world war. This is the biggest war in Europe since World War II, to, Ukraine war's ongoing. This is part of reality.
Yeah.
Again, that's the media's failure to do its job, to warn people just how dangerous the situation in Ukraine is. And yeah, the media portrays all these drones flying into Moscow as quote-unquote Ukrainian. They're being made in Europe. They're being guided by Starlink and US. Ukraine's just a launching platform.
That's just nature of the beast. I mean, people sort of get tired of given news, I guess, at point. But Iran responds if they target the remaining infrastructure, right? The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, if we have the Yanbu port, the pipelines, maybe the Alab refinery, if some of the remaining infrastructure gets hit, I think something gets broken economically that can't be put back together easily, and it'll take years. And that would kick off probably a global Great Depression that would be without precedent, to be honest. Because if I show you,
Agreed. If everything out of the Gulf, all the oil infrastructure in the Gulf gets taken out, we're heading to something worse than the Great Depression globally. And a lot of that pain will be felt in the United States.
one of my favorite charts is just one axis. How much oil is the country consuming? Along the other axis is how much GDP do they have? You would think it'd be scattered all over the place, as some places have figured out how to run an oil-free economy. Nope, it's a straight line. It's like one of the most robust charts I have in all of economics. Like, if you have more economy, you're going to be burning more oil, which makes intuitive sense, right? You just have to open your eyes when you're driving your car and you see all the other cars, and you see the trucks and you see the jets, and you think about the ships and where things actually come from, grapes from 1,500 miles away or whatever the season is. It's obvious, right? There's this connection, but I think we forgot that sort of as a people or as leaders. And so if we took out 25% of the world's oil for a period of time, next question, which 25% of the world's economy are we taking off the top, right? And that's if you don't get severe overshoot in the story. And it's going to be much worse in some countries than others. Like, obviously, poorer countries are just going to get it really in the shorts on this whole thing. So, but that's what's at risk here. And the thing that's driving me nuts, Mario, is I don't have people explaining, well, what's the benefit on the other side, right? Hey, we're dialing in, we're poking the bear. The benefit is, hey, they might concede more things at the negotiating table sooner. The downside is thermonuclear war. Like, they're just so asymmetrical to me. I don't, like, who's running this show? You have a sense of that yet?
Yeah, exactly. Like the capturing Karg Island. And obviously, we know Iran would retaliate by striking the energy infrastructure in the Gulf. Like, they've literally warned us. Stephanie, if you can play.
The Great Depression was 15% of the world GDP. That's how much the world shrunk during the Great Depression. This happens, 25%. It would be significantly worse than the Great Depression.
That video. They fired, what's it, Karashmag, or I'm mispronouncing it, but that's that big missile that has cluster warheads or cluster munitions on it. And this is it in Bahrain. Usually we saw those on Israel throughout the war on a daily basis. The
Fireworks!
Karashmag, whatever missile that was with the cluster munitions. And that was very difficult to intercept because you can't intercept all these different clusters. For the first time since the war started, they fired that on a Gulf country as a warning shot. The same way they struck Saudi as a warning shot, they struck Qatar as a warning shot, they struck the UAE as a warning shot, they struck vessels at Fujairah as a warning shot. So they're sending all these different warnings. And to add to the mix as well, the Houthis. The Houthis, obviously, Saudi struck them first. I don't know what the hell Saudi was thinking. The Houthis fired back at Saudi and they've threatened to close the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. And there's been reports today that this is a consideration, that there's a report here. First, the Houthis themselves said it, they're going to strike, not only close the Bab el-Mandeb, they've threatened that if Saudi strikes them, they're going to be striking the Saudi energy infrastructure, they said, and the key infrastructure.
We hit bridges today in Iran and energy sites. So Iran hasn't retaliated for that yet, but it might get bad.
Sure. As well as their Saudi oil installations. And you've got a report here from Reuters that Iran has asked Yemen's Houthi movement to stand ready to close the Red Sea oil shipping routes if the US strikes Iranian power infrastructure. So you've got the Iranians clearly saying they're going to retaliate tit for tat. You strike their energy or you escalate, they're going to escalate. And they're not going to escalate the same way they did during the war, which was more restrained. You'd strike the gas fields, they'll strike the gas fields in Qatar. Very targeted strike there on American infrastructure, American assets on the gas field. But this time, the fact that they fired this cluster munitions on Bahrain, the fact that they've already sent that warning to the Houthis, it just shows that this time around, especially after that massive funeral, we're dealing with a different Iran than the one during the war.
Yeah, and adding to, I guess, my frustration as just a American taxpayer is that every time we have one of these exchanges, CENTCOM, like clockwork, comes out and says, we intercepted all the missiles. And then an hour later, you get the satellite videos that show, yeah, and we intercepted some of those missiles with buildings, and pretty accurately. It's just like there's just nothing to sort of hang your hat on and say, I know who's in charge, I can believe them, and I trust what they're telling me at this point. So it just makes it really kind of hard to analyze.
What do you make of the movement in oil prices? Because that's going to be, I believe, that's one of the indicators that Trump looks at to decide what he could do next. When Trump was at $100 and something, he's just desperate to off-ramp. Trump went down below $70, immediately escalated. And now it's at 80 something, whatever, 70 something below $80. But I think WTI is in the 70s, high 70s. First, before we look at what Trump could do, what do you make of the price?
Oil will be going up. I've been saying it to 150 before the end of August, in my opinion. Very soon. We're getting towards the end of August now. End of July.
Oil prices are, and by the way, I used to be sort of like this lone nut on the side saying these don't smell right to me. This smells like there's an invisible.
Halfway through July, sorry.
first, before we look at what Trump could do, what do you make of the prices?
Oil prices are, and by the way, I used to be sort of like this lone nut on the side saying these don't smell right to me. This smells like there's an invisible hand sort of like dumping paper futures in there. So just to be
Yeah, the paper oil is being sold like crazy. Tons of manipulation. But they can't manipulate the physical. Once it runs out, once strategic oil is gone, that's the end. Oh, glad you're here again.
clear, the oil market consists of about one physical producer and consumer in the market compared to 50 financial players who are just there trading paper back and forth. So it's a very lopsided market, which means that if you have access to a lot of paper, you can really set the price. You don't discover the price in those markets. So I had my concerns that somebody was setting, not discovering prices. I didn't know how they could do that, Mario, because it's like a huge market. And again, oil is this thing you take out of the ground, you put it in the tank for a while, and then you burn it.
Basically, what's going on in the oil market is the U.S. system has found out how to really efficiently absorb all speculative money into paper oil. That means all the people that say, oh, I want to invest in oil, they go out and they buy some ETF, some oil futures, something. It'll be paper. And that demand, that buying power never reaches the physical markets. It never causes someone, okay, someone's buying oil in the futures market, I better put some oil in a container to deliver it for that person. That doesn't happen anymore. All the speculation is absorbed by the paper. And so all that's left to set the price of oil is what's actually going on with actual demand for oil versus the supply for oil. And if you release oil from a strategic reserve to make up the shortfall from the Iranian oil, then you balance demand in the physical market. All the speculation is absorbed by paper oil. And that's how you get this ridiculous graph you see here, where it's oil is half of what it should be.
You know, it's like it has this really, I didn't think it could be manipulated this long. Now, increasingly, there's more people sort of joining.
I did. I saw it happen in food stuff in 2010.
That fringe view is now kind of a little bit more center. Like, this doesn't make any sense. And the reason it really doesn't make any sense is that we can see where supplies are right now. We're still off about 6 or 7 million barrels per day out of the Persian Gulf. Russia's refining capacity is now down by 50%. They are now a net importer. Yeah, a net importer of gas and diesel, right?
Yeah, he said it there. I do not believe that. Russian refinery capacity has been knocked offline, but it's not 50%. If it was 50%, Russia would already be striking Europe. I tell you that straight up. It would be like absolute 50%. That's Russia's entire existence in jeopardy. And it'd be nukes flying at Europe at that point.
And they used to be a net exporter. So there's oil and then there's oil products. The products are getting very, very tight. You've probably had people talk about the crack spread and all this and that, but the physical product, very tight right now. But oil, mysteriously low, but this is the one that everybody focuses on and gets reported, and things can't be that bad because WTI is only 79 a barrel. But what's happened is that we look at the demand on the backside of that. So if supplies are dinged now by probably close to 10 million barrels a day when we add Russia in, okay, somewhere in that 8, 9, 10, somewhere, depends on your counting. Well, what you really need is you need demand to come down by that much to match these two. Okay, we haven't. Demand is still much higher than supply, and we've seen the inventories going down across the world.
Of the refined products.
Yes, of refined, but even oil inventories are down quite a bit, right?
Yeah.
I think we're like 450 million barrels. And it's hard to know. I don't actually know what China's got. Some stuff gets reported, but I'm going to put some salt on that. But at any rate, what we really need is we need demand to come back down in alignment with supply, but we're not seeing that. Jet flights taken, which is a perfect proxy for jet fuel usage, road miles traveled, all the usual arbiters of demand. The demand is still too high relative to supply. So what do you need? Well, you need prices to go up to kill enough demand to bring it back down in alignment with supply. We're not doing that. The decision has been made to try and keep demand as high as possible, keep prices as low as possible.
That's the tragedy about all this. In a real world, oil would have gone up to 150 or 130, 140. The demand would have been destroyed, and that'd be the end of it. It would have stayed around that level during the war. Maybe it would have edged up to 150 by now. But because of this suppression of the price, I say it's going to go up to 150 by the end of August. I don't think it'll stop there. The high point is definitely going to be somewhere over 200 in the physical market. In the paper market, oil in paper market has been trading like $40 below the physical market when oil shortages have happened during the war. So, but I think the physical market might go up to 250 at the worst, and then the futures market might hit 200. It's going to be bad in any case.
Possible, and we're just going to continue to run down the inventories when we get there. Okay. That works until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, that's the concern that I have. And other people share this, is that what you're setting yourself up for is not sort of like bumping into this brick wall. It's hitting it at 50 miles an hour, right?
Exactly.
This creates a demand shock, supply shock situation where you just see all of a sudden prices just go chaotic. You get actual shortfalls. And these are very economically damaging things, which is why I was so surprised to see Trump, whoever, continuing this tit for tat. Whatever they're doing, they're not negotiating in good faith, right? They keep sending Witkoff and Kushner, which tells me that's bad faith negotiating. Like, that is a starting point. So we're not.
Yeah, it's insane that he keeps sending those to Trump. But when they finally negotiate a deal and Trump gets serious about ending this, when there's an actual oil shortage, I have a feeling those two won't be sent.
Negotiating in good faith. It's like there's actually no interest really in getting the situation resolved and the Strait opened. And we're rapidly heading towards a situation where that price spike is going to be a really damaging economic shock. And
Yep.
my sense, just guessing, is that Trump et al., whoever that is, they need somebody to blame for that. So I think that's why they poke the bear, and then finally Putin, responds, poke Iran, finally they respond.
No. It's just Trump wasn't ready to surrender to Iran, which is what the MOU was, a surrender to Iran. He wanted the straits open, but he wasn't willing politically to surrender to Iran and incur the political costs of that. So that's why he ended up tearing up the MOU and reneging on everything and going back to this war and maybe contemplating some type of absolutely idiotic ground operation, is because he's desperate. The MOU taught him that it's political suicide to surrender to Iran. And so he's going to try everything he can to avoid that. But things are going to get so bad in the global economy because of the oil shortage, he's going to be forced to surrender. So he's going to have both of that damage coming to him politically at once. Surrendering to Iran and everyone around the world furious at him, including the United States, over high oil prices and oil shortages. That's the end result of all this. That's why I say Trump's presidency is over. He's going to be a lame duck. Republicans are going to lose midterms. It's all bad.
And then we get to go, oh, everything was going great, Mario. We had all the gas we needed. Stocks were high until they did that. And then, you have somebody to sort of pin it on, I think, if that's considered a strategy. But otherwise, I can't make sense of this.
I like how you say twice you said Trump or whoever it is, or Trump et al. Because I've been thinking a lot about this today. I even put it in one of my posts. I just don't know who's calling the shots. I did a post actually, it went viral today. I said Trump could have been a great president. And then I put a comment under it, saying that things he's doing don't make sense and harming the US. And it's starting to look more and more like he's not the one calling the shots. That's just an interesting observation I've seen there, something I've been talking about.
I beg differ with you, Mario, there. To me, everything is pretty much what it's expected. You're just expecting Trump to accept this MOU, this political suicide. He can't. His ego, he doesn't want to be a failed president. And living up to the MOU, that's the end of his presidency. That's why he couldn't do it. It makes sense to me. The only thing that can solve this is an oil shortage. That's what's needed for Trump to actually be forced to surrender to Iran.
Been thinking about a lot. But just before moving away, I want to go back to the oil price. So I've learned about the crack spread in the last few weeks from a few of my guests. And Jeffrey Curry talked about it. Philip talked about it. I don't want to butcher his last name. Pilkington, I think. And it's mainly the concern is that the refined product is the one that's really, really expensive. There's various theories why. One is, as you said, in something that Jeffrey Curry talks a lot about, is the refining capacities is obviously in the Gulf. It's constrained heavily. And also in Russia because of the Ukrainian strikes. I didn't know it's 50%, but I do know Russia is a net importer of refined product from India, out of all places. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons why the crack price is so high, why the end product is so high. And then another reason that Philip's talking about goes back to the oil price manipulation. And he's been very vocal about it, is he believes something fishy is going on. He doesn't know how. He has different theories, like manipulating oil prices through, feeding the algorithms.
It's not hard. Yeah, paper oil. That means investor demand for oil. Anyone out there like you and me who wants to invest in oil, how do you do that? Unless you're going to rent out a tanker and fill it with oil and just keep it at sea. That's the one way to actually invest in physical oil. And at one point, like during the 2008 financial crisis, there were investors doing that. Today, no one is. All the demand for oil is absorbed by Wall Street and disappears into paper. None of it reaches the physical oil. So all that matters in physical oil is supply and demand. And if you have governments releasing from reserves, that makes up the shortfall from the Gulf, and so you have low oil prices. And when those reserves from the governments run out, then you have panic and soaring prices.
Algorithmic traders, all these LLMs with false information, false hope, a post by Trump or a report by the Wall Street Journal that was leaked, etc., that keep suppressing those oil prices. But the price coming out of the Strait of Hormuz of the actual barrel, which is not publicized on all these different platforms, that oil price, according to his calculation, is actually at 110, 115, probably 120 now dollars with the increase in the futures prices or the spot prices. So one of them is the actual refined product is a lot more expensive because of the issues with the refining in the Gulf in Russia. The other one is the actual oil price, the crude oil price, is a lot higher than what we see on the paper markets. For the one, even higher than the dated Brent price, that is again the paper price. To get a barrel of oil, which is usually confidential information, the refineries don't publish that information; they just publish the end product, the price of that, is a lot higher than what is being publicized. So he thinks there's like some sort of big conspiracy happening there.
Well, there's a big conspiracy.
Yeah, and again, it's to set the so-called quoted paper price. It's actually fairly easy in the scheme of things because there's almost no humans involved anymore. You know, back at even Yahoo Finance says, "Oh, it was a down day on the stock market," and they show a picture of some dudes in colored jackets. You know,
Yeah.
they don't.
This is encouraged, by the way. The trading by algorithm, trading by AI is encouraged by the powers that be on Wall Street because it's easier to manipulate. The way these trading algorithms work is they scan news articles and they look for keywords. And if positive keywords about oil, they buy oil. Negative keywords about oil, like an oil glut, then they sell oil. And, well, powers to be encouraged this because they control what's in the media. You've seen those video clips of all evening news across the United States using the same language. Well, you have that going on in financial news publications where everyone can start talking about an oil glut at the same time. Ding! Triggers the electronic traders to sell oil. It's purposefully using hedge funds to manipulate the market however they want.
Exist anymore, right? It's blinking rows of server lights, you know, and so when you think about an ecosystem of algorithms, they have what's called rules-based trading, right? And they all have different rule sets, and they're pursuing different strategies, but quite a lot of them just follow the momentum. Like, are things going up? Oh, I better do this then.
That's another one, momentum trading. Looking at graphs.
Oh, in stock trading, if the VIX, the volatility measure, goes down, well, then I'm going to buy futures, right? It's just, that's what happens algorithmically. So I think that the way it works is that the people who are in charge of all this, they've got very sophisticated financial software, and they know where the pressure points are. It's not like they have to like sell oil completely, but if you nudge this ETF down and you drop a few things over here, and then you drop some puts in the market here, there are little pressure points that they've probably learned, and then all the algos go, oh, that's what's happening, and they go that way, right? Yep. It's not people making rational or irrational decisions with slips of paper and noisy, vocalizations. It's just not what it is. So is it possible to manipulate an ecosystem of algorithms? I submit to you it's easier than it's ever been.
Yeah, that's what Philip is arguing a lot on, advocating for, saying that this is happening. He's been very, very vocal about it because he's like, Murray, just things don't make sense. He reminds me of that scene, or the scenes in the movie The Big Short of, what's the trader's name? Michael Burry. Michael Burry kind of being the odd one out, the bizarre.
Big Short is a big sore point for me because The Big Short, the book and the movie, they pretend to tell how the 2008 financial crisis happened. And it's completely made up bullshit. It was regulators that created the subprime market and set the stage for the financial crisis. And you won't find any information about that in the movie The Big Short. It's propaganda. Maybe whether the person who made it knew it was propaganda or was just repeating what was in the media, I don't know, but it is propaganda.
A guy with the loud music, with his whiteboard, he knows how things should be, but then the whole world disagrees with him and thinks he's crazy. But he just looks at it, he's like, 1 + 1 is not equaling 2, and everyone admits that it's not equaling 2, but everyone says that's the way it is, but it's not, it doesn't make sense. So that's kind of the feeling I get when I speak to.
That was me back in 2010, going completely crazy with what was going on in agricultural markets, and ended up in me big article titled the 2010 food crisis, just outlining how, we're heading for major spike in crude food prices because the media is lying. Everyone's lying. The entire world's lying. It's a conspiracy. No, I'm kidding. But basically, that's what set me down on the road that, yeah, there had to be a conspiracy. How could, when I, just this average guy on the internet, could find out all this information, see there was a horrible food shortage coming, why couldn't the sophisticated people at Wall Street Journal figure that out too? My guess is that they knew and that they were just lying. That you need a conspiracy for something like that to happen.
Philip, but that would be pretty scary if this is the case, because it means that below the surface things are a lot worse.
Yeah,
than what we
I
think.
love
And we
that-
think they're
I
pretty
love
bad.
that movie. I love that
It's
movie
incredible.
for all sorts of reasons. It's so, I watch it like once a year at least. But another instructive part of that movie is, you got Baum, the character Baum is like, wait a minute, all the underlying bonds are blowing up, but our anti-bond insurance policies are like just being held steady, right? And they're just yelling at Goldman Sachs and all the other big players because they're like, wait a minute, how are you holding the price of this product steady? Well, everything under it is rubble, and they just can. So that's what they do.
Have
Problem.
you
We
been
take oil
looking
out
at
of the
China?
ground and we set it on fire. This is a different market. I think we're really playing with something different this time because this is trying to deny reality, right? Ayn Rand said you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality.
Yep.
We're
Who's that
working
quote by?
really by Ayn Rand.
That's a good quote. You can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of reality. That's a killer quote.
Yeah. So we're ignoring it right now. It's oil's reality. That's my core philosophy.
Also, I saw a report yesterday. I saved it so we could discuss it, and I lost it. No, there it is. Hold on. Economics.
Here's the graph of wheat prices. And here is where it became obvious, started becoming obvious to the entire world we were heading for a huge problem. And then they crashed the price of wheat. And I wrote the 2010 food crisis article around here. And wheat went from $4 to touching $9, more than doubled. I could see it coming. Why was the entire financial media complex talked about record harvests and how food was going to crash? It was doing just what they're doing today in oil, right here in the food. And then it goes from all the way down here, $2.50 to $9 over the next year. They were lying. They were lying here when they said there were record harvests.
Perfect. There it is. Chinese teapot oil refineries have resumed imports, adding a new level of pressure on the fragile oil markets, coming at the worst time now that the US has reimposed the blockade. So, and there's a chart there from Bloomberg Opinion that shows that the tanker arrivals to China, which is the only indication from Vortex, the only indicator we could use to get figures from them, has picked up massively, went down all the way to zero, and has picked up again. I'll get the actual chart and I'll show it for the audience. But because that's something we talked about before, why are the Chinese not buying up? If you could show that image, please, Stephanie. Why are the Chinese not buying up oil? Was there a deal done between Trump and Bibi? Sorry, between Trump and Xi. So we talked about.
I think there was. Don't sell weapons to Taiwan and we'll release X amount from our strategic oil reserve.
This last time, but if the Chinese now start buying up oil and Trump reinforces his blockade, doesn't just put a symbolic blockade for political reasons, and actually enforces his blockade, and China and Iran keeps striking ships going through the Omani side, and Trump sanctions ship that pay the Persian Gulf Strait Authority, if all these things continue happening, and China's buying up oil, I'm guessing there's going to be a lot more pressure. With my
Huge
limited
amount of
knowledge,
pressure.
1 + 1 = 2 knowledge.
As Michael Burry says in that movie, I'm not wrong. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, we all yeah, that's pretty stunning if that chart's accurate. I mean, I know they have to use a proxy for that, so they're using ship traffic, looks like, but that's fine. That's a decent proxy. So we all know that China, for some reason, pulled its imports back hard and lived off of their savings for a while, and now it looks like they're going to get back in the game, which you just have to. There's only so long you can continue this. The United States, interestingly, really dialed down over the last week. The data came out on Wednesday, which would be yesterday, that our strategic petroleum reserve only got drawn down, I think, like 3 million barrels, and we were only exporting somewhere in the high threes compared to.
Well, if you do look here, there was this splurge of oil that came out from the Gulf during this memorandum of understanding. And so drawdown being low 1 week, that's probably because those ships are starting to arrive in the United States.
6 of oil. So we really pulled back on that at this point, which means that I think we're about to see tightness in the world oil markets. Again, Europe is very poorly positioned for this, and lots of Asia really poorly positioned right now.
Yeah. And I had one more thing I wanted to ask you about. I saved it. Let me see where it is. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So this is another report on China, and I saved it to bring it up with you to get your thoughts on it. Extending any, so I'll read it out. Excluding any US. Hold on, if you can show these charts as well, Stephanie, so the audience and Chris could see it. Excluding any US-Iran talk about Hormuz, China remains the most important factor for oil prices for the next 60 days or so. All eyes are on Beijing. Ex-China Asian oil imports have recovered to normal levels within the 2023-2025 range. What China does next is crucial. Last week, I wrote this opinion column, this Javier Blas. Last week, I wrote this opinion column about what China may do next. I see a recovery in oil imports in July and August, but purchases will remain 25% below pre-war levels. Based on my industry soundings, I don't see China stockpiling in the short term. Important to note that the very preliminary data for July 1 to 14th shows no recovery whatsoever in Chinese oil imports. And that was yesterday, by the way, with seaborne offloadings running at 5.5 million barrels per day, below the June average, per Vortexa data. That's extraordinary for a country that pre-war buying was 10 to 12 million. So based on this data there, this report is from also today, not long ago. So this report is from not long ago. And then I saw the other, and this is a reply to the other report about the teapot oil refineries resuming imports. Can you maybe explain what I just read to me and the audience and what it means and what we should be on the lookout for?
So this is China. The blue is 2025, and the red is 2026. And look how it plunges down, the demand. It's not zero, by the way. It plunges to 5 from 10, so half is where it is into August. The only reason for something like this is that China is burning through its strategic oil reserves. And strategically, they have to have made a deal with Trump to keep using their reserves when oil is at like 70. That doesn't make sense. Demand should have been picking back up. But although China has huge reserves, this can't go on indefinitely. And it's risky for them. What if the war escalates and the entire Gulf goes up in flames? Then having used this much of their reserves during a period of relatively low oil was a massive mistake. So we'll have to see if it backfires on China.
When it comes to China?
Well, I mean, China is not just sort of one of many oil importers we want to look at. It is the world's largest oil importer by far, right? So normally up around 10, 11 million barrels a day, and sometimes as high as 12, depending on the year and the season. So that's China. They've been a very, very steady and growing source of demand, and it's not even close. I mean, the United States, we import maybe 2.5 million barrels of crude oil per day. Then there's all these other products. It gets complicated very quickly. But China was in the business of importing a lot of oil. Some of that they would turn around and do the United States model, which
I think the United States is closer to 6 million barrels imported per day. 2 net. That means we export 4 and we take in 6.
because you run it in your refineries and then you sell the refined products for profit, because that's what manufacturers do, to other folks out there. But China's consuming a huge amount of oil all on its own. It's not really all that well positioned. It probably produces about 4.7 million barrels a day, which is good. It's up from 4 just a year ago. So they've been finding some more oil, but they don't really have massive shale plays or other things they can really dial into. So they're going to be in the business of importing oil for a very long time. And by the way, the United States, our own EIA, Energy Information Administration, has said that we're at peak oil now too in the shale place, right? So, we'll bump along for a while. Nothing goes to zero immediately, but the years where the shale oil in the world could suddenly, is there another 5 million barrels per day of demand? We'll pump 5 million more. This is it. We're going to bump here between 13 and 14 for a while, and then it's going to slow, rock off. And
shale oil is fracking, and I honestly believe the fracking boom delayed the collapse of the dollar by about 10 years. It made the United States no longer reliant on oil imports the way it used to be. It boosted the producing sector of the United States economy. It was a boom. It really helped the United States out, but that's coming to an end.
Given that, I've heard people come up with these strategies like, if Trump does this, then we'll supply the world with energy. It's like, no, we really won't.
If he does this, what do you mean? Does what?
Wrecks the energy infrastructure of the Gulf and Russia, right? Then we'll step up. We'll just take market share. Sort of a smash and grab disaster capitalism model. But the truth is, we don't have that as a nation. Like we don't,
because we've reached
still,
peak oil.
Yeah, and we're still a net importer of oil at this.
We haven't reached peak oil in that there is a lot of oil that can still be developed. 2 places Venezuela, huge amount of oil that's undeveloped because obviously the sanctions and whatnot. And there's like 1 trillion barrels of oil up here that has yet to be developed. So, yeah, Russia has a lot of oil. So don't worry about running out of oil anytime soon.
Point in time, right? Now, other stuff, we have all this other stuff.
In the short run, because of Hormuz, we might be running out of oil.
Natural gas liquids, that's ethane, propane, butane, principally some pentane, but mostly it's ethane and propane. And a lot of butane. Let's call it those three. So anyway, we got a lot of that stuff. So we sell that to the rest of the world, way more than we could possibly use. Fine. But what we don't have enough of is actual oil, and especially we don't have this stuff called sour oil. And sour oil gets the sour moniker because it's got sulfur in it. Oil can be contaminated with all kinds of things, vanadium, nickel, you name it. But the sulfur is this key component. And it's often as high as like 2, 3, even 4% of the total weight of that oil coming out of the ground is just sulfur. And it turns out this sulfur has just been this wonderful but ignorable byproduct of the petroleum age. It's like, what are we going to do with these big piles of yellow stuff? And the answer is lots of stuff, because we need it to make sulfuric acid. And with that sulfuric acid, you can do everything from mining copper to mining other metals, zinc. You can use it specifically to take the phosphate rock in Morocco or in the United States, wherever you have phosphate rock, to turn it into phosphate fertilizer. You got to put sulfuric acid on it, right? It's part of the chemistry of it. You get gypsum, and then you get this, sulfur phosphate compound at the back end. And because of that, that's a bioavailable fertilizer. And I think you saw, but Trump did this emergency lifting it was an import fee on Moroccan phosphate, because all of a sudden we're a little light on that product here in the United States. So by keeping this sulfur off the market, right? So this is what I said, there would be a huge disaster if these refineries get knocked out in an escalation in the Gulf. The reason that's so bad is that it's not just the oil that's missing. That's bad. It's not just the products, all the naphtha, the ethylene, the pentane, all the other stuff that comes out of that. It's the fact that we're missing the sulfur that comes out as a byproduct, as a waste residue from this process. It's
huge implication for fertilizer and mining.
Anything but. And the Gulf region was one
process.
Yeah. Yep. You end up with a lot of sulfur. And so we need that sulfur for all kinds of reasons. And so if you pulled up a chart of like sulfur or sulfuric acid prices, it's just like, right. I don't think those markets are as manipulable or manipulated. And so you tend to, there's certain areas you can still go and you can say, yeah, that looks like a functioning market right there. It could be volatile, but oh boy, those prices shoot up quite a lot. And so missing this sulfuric acid, I've really shortchanged just like how many industrial processes and mining processes are really key on.
Also, no nation on earth has sulfuric acid reserves like they have oil reserves. And that makes it, you can't manipulate the physical in sulfuric acid the way you can in oil.
This magic substance. And again, I don't know that we have a reasonable response to that at this point. There really ought to be some international commission of folks, a treaty amongst nations, however you want to frame that, who should come together and talk about what we're going to do if or when we're short on sulfuric acid next year. Should it go to the little tiny copper mine in the Congo? Should we divert it? Is there a higher use? Do we need it for phosphate? Does Morocco have everything they need? There's going to be some issues there that are going to be pretty profound if we don't deal with them. And so, what do you got there? That sulfur?
That's the sulfuric acid price index.
Yeah. I can't read the bottom
Is that the
scale.
right one?
Yeah, oh yeah,
The
sure.
bottom scale starts from 2015 all the way to 2027.
Yeah, you see, it's been in a pretty tight band there till lately, And
That's insane.
yeah, so that's a really significant input cost. But it speaks too that there's actual shortages of that stuff showing up.
Trump already sent troops into Iran. It went so badly they had to fabricate a down pilot story. Well, I think it was both, actually. I think that there was a pilot went down, and they used that as an opportunity. Okay, we were planning to go in it anyway, and they did the ground invasion, and it went very poorly, and they had to leave. But in any case, it's true. They did send in troops, but no one died. So it wasn't a true catastrophe is when U.S. sends troops in and you get hundreds of casualties. And that's the type of ground invasion that we might be heading for in the next week.
Yeah, sulfuric acid is great.
And nice to have you here, Zinif.
Sulfur would give you a similar looking chart because it's the thing that sulfuric acid is derived from. But we've already heard about various mines out there. Maybe they're marginal mines, but they've already curtailed or even shut down operations because they can't afford or can't get access to the sulfuric acid at this point. And again, that's now. But if this all drags on for longer, it just gets worse. And so when we ask the question, so you show that chart in Asia and China, and there's that big hole in imports, right? That big hole in imports means that we know in the Gulf, what happened was you had 180 plus ships or whatever that were just parked there. And then when they were full, just stuck there, getting barnacled up for those months and all of that. I feel sorry for the sailors. But while that was happening, a lot of,
That's sulfur in the last year.
Yeah.
Sulfur in the last year. Look at that. Tripled.
That's a perfect chart.
That's what I would have thought oil should have looked like.
Exactly. That's a good point. 2,200 to now 9,200. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Is that true? Far out.
That's a real
That's
from
trading economics. But why is no one talking about this?
Because it's sulfur. Sulfur isn't, who cares about sulfur? What does sulfur matter? People don't know what sulfur is used for.
Don't know. It's a big deal.
This should be everywhere. Holy shit. Look at this. Over the past month, sulfur's price has fallen 1%, but it's still 300% higher than a year ago. This is according to the trading on CFDs that tracks the benchmark market for this commodity. Jesus Christ. Let me get you, hold on. This is a dark one. Let me send you a screenshot of it in white. It's just for the audience. It must be easier for the eyes. There you go. Here you go, Stephanie. You can show this to the audience. It's white. Better. Easier to read. But Jesus Christ, let's put the 5 years. So this is the 1 year. Look at the 5 year one. Holy crap, Chris.
Yep. Look at that. So right here, whole Iran war starts and from 400 to 900 doubles. And in the lead up to it, it went up too because people were scared because of the war. But if oil prices did that, they'd be around 150.
That's pretty wild.
Yep. And again, it's this ignored little thing. I submit to you that part of the reason it's done that is because there's not a big paper market for sulfur. It's a physical commodity and it's traded between buyers and sellers for the most part. If they got their...
And the governments don't have strategic sulfur reserves that can be released in the event of the closure of Strait of Hormuz. Oil can be manipulated partly because of those huge U.S. strategic oil reserves. We can't do that with physical in sulfur because the reserves don't exist.
Paper hands on it. Well, I bet they'd be able to drive the price right down.
Exactly. I was going to say. Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Like,
to an extent, that's true, but unless governments actually have physical reserves that they can use in coordination with the paper, there's a limit to how much prices can be suppressed.
The fact that there's no massive liquidity in the paper market is a good thing because we can get the actual price, not the traders playing around with it.
Yep. So
that is such an interesting thing you've highlighted. What a way to end the show, man. That was a hell of a bang.
Oh, good. I love going out on a bang. But this is going to be, we're going to have to talk about this more because, hear me now, believe me later. When in 6 months, the Wall Street Journal will catch up and go, oh, this sulfur shortage is pretty bad. Because it's just in so many processes, it's hard to do it justice. It's like the core of our industrial society, and how we feed ourselves.
Can you tell me again what it's mainly used for? Like, with such high prices or shortages, what would that impact in the economy?
So, chief among them, anything that relies on the sulfuric acid itself. So this is going to impact mining and copper mining. And what we would expect to see is that, and copper's in severe shortage already.
Also fertilizer.
But you find the marginal mines where the ore grades are kind of crappy. It won't be worth it anymore. There'll be a break-even point where they can't afford the sulfuric acid. So we'll be looking for shortfalls or additional failure to grow in the copper supplies going forward, which we don't actually need right now as a global community. 2 is going to be the
copper. There's apparently coming shortage in copper.
Fertilizer costs, because this is the prime. You need the sulfuric acid to create the phosphate. So there's nitrogen, potassium, and phosphate, the NK and the P in the story. That P is a very important component. It's used, put on fields all the time, every year. And if we don't have enough sulfuric acid to get that, we can't afford to have fertilizer shortfalls at all. So that would be one of the things I think people should get together.
Too late for that. The fertilizer shortfalls this spring because of Hormuz closure.
And say, maybe not the marginal copper mine in the Congo. Maybe we should use the stuff over here to make fertilizer, right? And just agree on that. And then there's just a innumerable other sort of sub-derivative products that happen, including very, very, very purified sulfuric acid is used in making chips, wafers. Part of the chip process. It's so many industrial processes. It's hard to.
So that means the whole stock market boom, the whole AI boom would get a massive hit. That means inflation would take a massive hit because of the fertilizers.
Yep.
So that hits
next year. Is going to be big inflation because of what's going on in food and sulfur and helium and the rising fuel costs this year get passed on. Some of them next year. All of that huge inflationary pressure next year. And actually, I think we're going to end this here because I've reached the part that I really want to talk about. Sulfur price more than doubling since the war started, and how that's not happening in oil because of manipulation in the paper side and releases of reserves by governments around the world. But those releases by governments, that's coming to an end because we're reaching the bottom of the barrel in terms of our stored oil, and that's why prices are going to shoot to the moon very soon. Anyway, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch, and I'll see you next video. Bye.